Yeah, so it should be totally white when you're not talking.
It is.
Great.
That's the offshoot podcast that we have to have totally white.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Fools and Fiction. We are the Fools, and this week the fiction is Lord of the Rings, and we're going to be talking about the Lord of the Rings fandom and how it's evolved from its beginning. And with us here as a special guest, is my own mother. Hello, Shelly Cox.
Hello, Fools and Fiction listeners.
And we also have Joe.
As usual, I'm here, just being the foil to Finn and trying to destroy the podcast from within.
Very briefly, this is a different setup than we've ever had because Joe and I are in the same room, but we're also with a guest who's in another room. So hopefully the audio works out with this, but we'll see. So
we're off to a great start of like 10 minutes of me trying to figure out why the usual setup won't work, and then like suddenly having one of my neurons fire for once and remind me.
So the way we wanted to talk about this today is my mom was or I guess still is, a great big Lord of the Rings fan, and she was near the beginning of that fandom. So we thought it would be really interesting to get her experiences around as the fandom started and figure out how it changed as the internet came into prominence, and kind of interject with our own thoughts about how the internet has influenced fandoms. So our first topic here is just, Mom, how you got into Lord of the Rings. How did that happen?
I'll correct you, I guess. I don't think I'm a great big Lord of the Rings fan. There are so many people who do scholarly work with the Lord of the Rings, and compared to them, I'm a really wimpy Lord of the Rings fan. But I know enough to talk about it with you guys. So that I'm excited to do. And I think especially with the idea that my interest in Lord of the Rings and the burgeoning Lord of the Rings fandom online coincided with, the internet becoming more of a social experience. And I think those are interesting topics to talk about, the way that they all coincided. So in that aspect, you can call me a Lord of the Rings fan for sure.
You've got
that's off the
costumes
topic.
and stuff, Mom.
Pardon me?
I'm pretty sure you're a big Lord of the Rings fan.
That's one of the things that like I see a lot in fandoms is people gatekeeping themselves, where they're like, oh no, like I couldn't possibly be this huge fan, and like a big fan compared to a lot of other people, so there's stuff where I'll say like, oh, I'm not a fan of this, and then I can like list off dates and stuff.
That's definitely an old tradition of people comparing their fandom for sure. But to my credit, to be totally deferential or self-deprecating, I have never read the Silmarillion, and I cannot speak either Elvish languages and all of that kind of extremely, down the rabbit hole Lord of the Rings fan stuff.
But I think the thing that makes you a fan is that the Lord of the Rings meant something to you when you were first reading it, and it's still something you think about. So can you talk about like what the role of Lord of the Rings was?
Yeah, that's a very good segue there for you, and for me actually, very smart. So I got into Lord of the Rings because my mom and my sister read it. The books that Fellowship came out in 1953. And my sister is older than I am, and she read them in the 70s when they were more popular, I think just because of the counterculture movement embraced so much of the Lord of the Rings, kind of against Tolkien's desire, but whatever. They were very popular in the 70s, and my sister read them, and then she insisted that I read them, and I was a little kid when I first read them, like 9 or something, and, only got a bare enjoyment out of them, just like how fun the hobbits were and how exciting it was to travel in the woods. And the more often I read the books, of course, the more I got out of them. But I think those initial impressions of being in love with the race of the hobbits and being in love with the idea of traveling in the woods and backpacking and, going somewhere of your own accord on your feet, definitely has stuck with me since then.
So you're, I mean, not to oversimplify, but you really liked the adventuring aspect and just like, what was Lord of the Rings the thing that kind of brought you into the world of fantasy, or were there other things that you read?
No, I read a lot of fantasy when I was a little kid, Madeline L'Engle, and just all the fantasy I could get my hands on, really. Although maybe it started with Lord of the Rings. I can't really remember how it went, but I grew up in the country, kind of near Joe, actually, and had, horses and lots of trails and just spent time goofing off in the woods. So I think for me, it wasn't fantasy or science fiction as much as a kind of a reverence for spending time in the woods. Definitely did it for me.
Cool. I know. So my exposure to Lord of the Rings is Mom read them to me when I was little, and then I saw the extended movies several times. So I think I can, in some extent, relate to that, also growing up in the country around where Mom grew up.
Meanwhile, my exposure for Lord of the Rings has been like very secondhand. Like I've seen the movies, and at some point had read the books like what seems like eons ago. Mm-hmm. And I, just kind of a lot of what happened was I get a lot of enjoyment from it from other people, and so a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan." I'm like, "Please talk about it," because I love hearing people get really passionate about it. It's one of the original fantasy things that people got really passionate about. From what I've seen, that and A Wrinkle in Time, which was the one that I got really passionate about really early. But I definitely agree where my fantasy upbringing was kind of sitting in my treehouse with a book and a grape soda and a moon pie and just enjoying being in Goochland in the middle of nowhere.
I remember sitting on the porch in Harper's Ferry. I think I would be sitting on the ground on the porch, and Mom would be in the chair, and she'd be reading Lord of the Rings, and we had all these citronella candles because of course it's very mosquito-y in Harper's Ferry, and I'd be burning little twigs in the citronella candles and watching the fire as Mom was reading Lord of the Rings.
I think an elemental part of Lord of the Rings is the language and the various languages, and just how melodious the entire thing is. I have always loved reading them out loud. I read them out loud to my neighbor Karen when we were little, and that totally changed both of our lives. And then reading it out loud to you, and then there's an audio version of the books that is read by a famous voice actor that I really cherish. That collection that I have it on CDs. If anyone ever has CD players anymore, I feel like that's valuable. I really enjoy listening to that.
Which voice actor is that? Bob and I were trying to identify the person the other day. Is it Ian something?
I think it's Ingalls.
Ingalls. I
can Google it real quick, but I don't know if he's still doing voice acting, but he speaks. I mean, his dwarvish and elvish and the black speech, and he just has every accent down perfectly.
I remember enjoying those as well.
Yeah, like in the car. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how has your connection to Lord of the Rings changed? I guess how is it different now that it's been so long since you first read them? Oh wait, really quick, I forgot I was going to interject a question. Is this the same Karen that you played D&D with?
Yeah, it is actually. That's a very good point. Karen and I, we lived out in the country, and we were fairly isolated, and so we just did a lot of pretend play games and stuff when we were very little. And and I read the books to her, and it turned her into a reader after that. I mean, I don't know if I single-handedly turned her into a reader, but she definitely hadn't been reading before that. And it just really made a bond between us, and we played D&D together after that. And then she actually lost her first child, who died around when he was 1 year old. And when I went out to visit her after that happened, I brought her a Gandalf, figure, like an 18-inch Gandalf, and instead of like flowers or something. So I was just like, you need somebody to feel like they're looking over you and taking care of you and comforting, then that would be Gandalf. We definitely have like this shared world for, forever, because we did that so long ago, read those books together.
I know you can't see, but Joe and I were vigorously nodding. So what's your connection nowadays to Lord of the Rings? Now that it's been however many years,
it really has faded. So when the movies came out, before the movies, I would read the books once every couple of years or 3 years or something, or I'd go a stage and not read them for 10 years. I don't know, it's not been that long. But when the movies came out, then my interest changed entirely, and I was hardcore enjoying them, the movies and the books, when the movies were just out. That was over a period of 4 years, because Return of the King took 2 years to be released. And then I think I burned out, and I have watched the movies 2 or 3 times since then, and I don't think I've read the books again. So I think I probably need like a 10-year break, and then I'll come back again.
I guess it is such like a big world that when you read it, you're really in it for a while, I'd imagine.
You are, and I think I may have overdone it when the movies were out. And we can talk about this whenever you want, but my interaction with other fans just kind of became my whole social life at that time, and it just took over my, everything. And I think I probably obsessed. And it's just going to take me a while to recover from that, balance out my fandoms.
Oh, no, yeah, I remember, I think that might be something similar to what I was talking about in the Undertale episode.
When you just could not stop talking about it. When I was reading the books, I couldn't stop talking about them to friends. And then when I was watching the movies, I was on this message board constantly, or a couple of different message boards. And so I am in like a backing off period now. Of course, that doesn't mean I still have Sting hung up, displayed on my wall.
You've got 2 Stings, right?
No, I've got a little letter opener Sting. But
there's that one that Dad got a long time ago at the flea market, the lower quality one.
Oh yeah, I don't know what happened to that one. That one might be at Dad's house. But I have the replica Sting.
Yeah.
That's quite nice. The one that you accidentally cut your shirt with when you were polishing it.
See, you said I have Sting, and my brain immediately thought of the musician rather than what's relevant to what we're talking about. And so that there was a brief second where I was like, I need to like delve deeper into this, and then I realized like very very quickly like, oh, never mind, this is like a normal thing.
Yeah, Sting is very special for sure.
So you mentioned the what's the word? Chat rooms, forums?
Yeah.
Message boards. You mentioned the message boards you got involved in early on. What was that like way back in the day?
Yeah, so let me tell you kind of how I found the message boards for one thing.
Yeah.
So early fandom for Lord of the Rings was just the books, and you had a fairly solitary enjoyment of them. Every now and then you would run into someone who enjoyed them, and you'd talk about them, or you'd spread the word, like me reading aloud to Karen. But it was very much a solitary relationship, you and the books and the characters and the setting, and it certainly wasn't social. And the movie adaptations up until then had been fairly terrible. And I did not know anything about the Fellowship of the Ring at all before I sat down in the theater. I sat down with... Pardon me?
Do you mean the... Sorry, oh my god, stuttering is happening. What do you mean that you didn't know about Fellowship of the Ring?
Well, I mean, the movie.
The movie. Okay.
Right,
okay.
because previous adaptations had just been terrible, so no one really paid attention to them. Or not terrible, a lot of money had been put into one of them. It just everyone had a really hard time not making it look like a cartoon and making it seem like a child's version of a story. And I didn't know whether this thing that I was sitting down to that turned out to be, Peter Jackson's version would have actors in it or would have claymation or what the heck. And I sat down with with my sister and my mom, and the movie started, and I remember the exact moment in the movie, the exact scene where I just sat back and thought, oh, this is it, this is the real thing, this has been done well.
What scene was that?
So, the fellowship starts with a really long intro that talks all about the ring in the past, and it's got all these cut scenes of fighting, and, I think Galadriel has this... Yeah, part, right? It's just... Yeah. It's long. But then the Shire is introduced, and that's, to me, that's a little cheesy. You got all these hobbits, picking their noses and stuff. And then when Frodo and Gandalf meet on the road, Gandalf is in the cart, and they say kind of smirky things to each other, and then they smile, and Frodo jumps into the cart beside Gandalf, and it's totally seamless, the difference between their heights, and the special effects have been done perfectly, and they're smart, that you can feel the dynamics between the characters, and you can see that that every detail has been, attended to. And that's where my mind was blown. And I was like, oh my God, this is an entirely different way of doing the Lord of the Rings.
That particular scene you're talking about has definitely stayed around to this day, because there's a meme that actually, I think, just started recently. That's that shot you're talking about, where Frodo's saying, "Keep your secrets, then." To Gandalf.
Oh yeah.
So that's very popular on the internet. That's a big meme nowadays still.
That's definitely gonna date this episode.
Yeah, definitely an iconic scene, I think.
I'm glad
stayed around.
Yeah, it's the moment that the whole trilogy begins in my mind. But so that scene got me all excited about the movies, and I went home and immediately, turned on my computer, which was, I'm sure, dial up. And, I probably had some kind of Internet Explorer browser with no Google. And, I just typed in Lord of the Ring, Fellowship of the Ring movies to find out, how did they do that? What's going on? And let me enter into the world of these movies. And, the first thing that came up was this Lord of the Rings fan club, which just is something so cheesy I normally would stay away from it. But it had a message board on it. And I was so excited. It was the first time that I saw people talking about the Lord of the Rings, whom I didn't know. And it was the first time that I'd ever seen a message board, that I'd ever talked to a stranger online, which of course now sounds, ridiculous in multiple levels. But definitely it was 2001, I believe. Finn, you were 3 years old.
Yeah. So I thought that you were on the message board after the book. I didn't realize it was the movie that you sprung you into it.
Yeah, it was definitely a movie. I mean, there was no... I'm sure they're going to be, if they're listeners older than I am or more savvy than I am, like Bob Angel, for example, if he's listening, then he will, I'm sure, was on message boards way before this. But for me, it was brand new in 2001. I had just, the internet was a place where you just sent emails, or you used the world. I don't even know how to, all we did was send emails and sometimes visit a website. But talking to strangers was brand new.
Was there kind of a taboo around don't talk to strangers?
No.
Applying to the internet?
No.
Everyone was just so excited.
That came later, yeah. In fact, I was so excited to see this, to see that you could post on this message board, that I made up a moniker within 2 seconds, which I regretted for years later. It was Little Elf, all one word, all lowercase. And just because I couldn't think of anything, and I wanted to jump on right that very second and start talking to people.
Uh-huh.
So I did, and it was very cool. That was the fan club message board, which is a very embarrassing thing to admit to, but it opened up my, the world of fandom for a lot of people. I still have a lot of friends today whom I met on that message board.
Why do you say it's embarrassing to admit to?
I don't know. Fan club just seems like, very kind of pedestrian. Like, oh, and it was true. Anyone could join the fan club board. What they were trying to do, for some reason, is raise money for the production of the movies. And if you joined the fan club, then you would get magazines about the movie production, but you would also get your name in the credits of the movies.
Yeah.
And you just had to pay like $100 extra or something to get your name in the credits, and then they would have like a fan club listing in the back. And I kind of felt like that was cheesy. But then when the movies came out and I sat and watched the listing and I saw all my friends' names, I really regretted not being on that list. I was like, that's just like a legacy of friendship and involvement that I missed out on because I just felt embarrassed about it.
Do you know what they used the money for? Was it just for making the movies?
No, and I've heard that it was a bit of a scam. That they said that the names would be listed in the theater, but then they ended up only being listed on the DVD. A lot of people were disappointed, but I also heard from a friend who was talking with her boyfriend, who was really impressed that her name was on the credits, and they ended up getting married later. And she kind of credits that he thought she was cool. And for having gotten her name.
That's definitely like a great pickup line, is like, hey, I'm in Lord of the Rings. Like without any context or anything.
Yeah. Well, I know another couple who got married who met each other on those message boards. I went to their wedding shower. I'm not in contact with them anymore, but it was a really big deal for us. I mean, I don't know. In my generation, I remember parents talking about televisions and how people would stand outside of like the hardware store or the furniture store and peer in through the window and look at the televisions for sale and be amazed. And that was us for message boards and talking to people online. We were like, this is just a brand new world. Oh my God.
How did the message boards react when the second and third movies came out?
They just kept going very strong. A problem with that message board is probably what you guys see still today with fandoms, is that there's just so many people with so many different things that they want to say. And that board became very splintered. And the moderation became inconsistent, and there were a lot of rules of the moderators that a lot of people on the message boards did not agree with. Finn, I think I told you that that no one was allowed to reference being gay on the message board, which really blew the mind of a whole lot of people, including my friend Ian. His moniker was Arassian at the time, who was like, well, heck with that. I'm going to start my own message board, and we can talk about being gay all we want. And in fact, we talked about how light and airy and kind of, I don't know, everything I say is going to be so offensive, but we did not like the tone of the fan board because it was kind of like, oh, people just fawning over the actors and being offended very easily over dirty jokes or something. So we called that the light side. So when Ian started his own message board, he called it the dark side, and the logo was like a sheet of black with a pink circle, which is sexual. It was just us being as un-fan clubbish as we could be. And that was the next message board that I went to after the fan club, and it was invitation only. So it was just whoever wanted to be raucous about Lord of the Rings and not have to worry about not being able to say gay, for example. We all went to the dark side. That was a lot of fun.
A big difference between forums nowadays and then is that I kind of feel like there's a bit of a monopoly nowadays. So, like, there'd be no way, as far as I know, for anyone to start their own forum. Like, you can start your own subreddit, but it's still under Reddit rules. Is this something you know more about, Joe?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different, like, oligopolies, basically, that you have Reddit, which is, like, this huge monolithic entity. And then you have various Chan boards. And the big thing that's different about, like, 4chan and 8chan and whatever from Reddit is that everything is anonymous, and so like there are no moderators, and so a lot of extreme people on like all sides go there because there's a lot less sanitization. However that word's pronounced. But so you can like espouse really crazy stuff and there's no backlash for it. Which, on the one hand, like, being able to say, I think being gay is fine, is, like, an acceptable thing on that, as opposed to, like, some other forums in which it might not be. But you also will get the people who immediately respond with, like, the vilest things you'll ever read. And then there are a couple of other smaller forums that are, like, really niche dedication stuff. So like I constantly go through Smogon forums, which is specifically for competitive battling for Pokemon, and it's way better than the subreddit just because it's older than the subreddit, really, and so it ingrained itself more. And you have stuff like that with another thing that I'm on called HC Realms that has existed since the very beginning of the game for what it's a forum for, which predates Reddit, and not, it doesn't predate the internet, of course it had to exist, but it does predate a lot of, like, the internet as we know it, which is one of those really interesting things that creating a new, like, a new forum right now would be, like, suicide.
Yeah, although I guess I think the newest kind of forum that's been created, if it can be called one, is Discord. Because Discord servers, in a way, act like a lot of forums because you've got different channels for subtopics. And you've got moderation, and you've got different moderator levels. There's threads that can happen.
The thing with Discord is it's basically like invite-only forums, like, but it's only those.
Oh yeah, I forgot it was invite only.
And you can put out like a public link, but it still functions kind of in invite only. So there's a lot more ability to pick and choose like who is able to be on the Discord.
That brings me back to talking about that dark side forum that I was on that was created by Ian, I think, just because he was a burgeoning coder, and it was invitation only in terms of the fact that he ran the board and created it and ran it, and only people whom he invited would know about it. I mean, is that something that still happens today?
Not in the same way, but mostly because it's been, like, supplanted by other things. If that makes sense, like, you'll have really private, and kind of, not secular, but, like, isolated Discord servers, or
like GroupMe's.
Or, yeah, GroupMe's, or, Line, but that gets used a lot more, like, in Japan or whatever. And so there's all these different ways to have group, like, forums or group messages.
True. I guess we didn't have anything like that, so we just had to make it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
More streamlined, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
So how did Ian's forum he made himself go? Like, what is the state of it today, if it exists?
Well, he shut it down because I can't remember, but I have a feeling it just got kind of old because it was kind of, I don't want to say boring because that sounds like an insult, but we got kind of bored with it because we started it on kind of a lark, as a revolt against the light side. We started the dark side, and it wasn't we actually; it was Ian and several people. And what they would do would be to get on the dark side and plan to go be obnoxious over on the light side. There would be a thread on the light side, the fan club forums called the Prancing Pony, which is the name of the inn that is featured in Fellowship of the Ring, and that's where you theoretically could just talk about anything and have like little online parties where you pretend to serve each other food and drink and say silly stuff, and the Darksiders would just pop up at the Prancing Pony all at the same time and start making jokes and harassing people, and it was really spooky when you didn't know what was happening. Like, oh, how did these people know when to get on together and what's happening and what jokes are they making? And I mean, there was so much.
It was like you all were pulling some sort of like heist or something.
Yeah. I mean, they were doing it. I did not understand this at the time. It took a little while for me to get invited in. But it was like tricky because you didn't quite understand what was going on behind the curtain of the internet back then. I mean, I still don't, but folks like Ian too. And so the dark side was, invented, or Ian created it as a foil to the light side. And we met in person at different meetups, and then moved on because the internet was getting broader and people were finding other things to talk to other people about on the internet. And we'd already watched the movies and talked about the books 800 gazillion times. And I think Ian just closed it down. But I know those people. I moved with those people from the dark side to LiveJournal, and then picked up a few friends there. And then everybody from that group moved over to Facebook. And that's why all old people are on Facebook, is because there was like a progression.
So they all came from the Lord of the Rings.
We all came from the Lord of the Rings fan club, exactly.
And that's the really interesting thing, is that for our generation, Facebook kind of feels like this old dinosaur forum place where...
Although in like 5th grade it felt new.
Well, is that when I first got Facebook, I was like, wow, this is crazy and new. But then, being in high school and college and getting exposed to GroupMe or Discord or what have you, it felt like Facebook was kind of getting left behind. And what's really interesting is that it feels kind of like a bridge between the late 90s, early aughts of the internet, where you would have these very disparate forums and then kind of slowly get merged into like larger umbrella ones and then eventually find your way to Facebook. Whereas right now, you kind of start on Facebook and then you find your friends and then you make like a Discord server for your friends. And so,
yeah, I totally understand that, and I feel it just makes me feel old because I don't really have the need to go anywhere else right now, at least. But that's because of what my internet needs are, and what you guys' internet needs are different. But I agree. I think Facebook's struggling with that. I'm sure their demographics are just ancient, and that's why they bought Instagram and WeChat and although while they're moving, out internationally from the U.S. I don't know. It's a Facebook business I have no business talking about. But definitely a bunch of old people there.
Well, is there anything else any of us wanted to talk about before we end off the episode?
We talked about... let's see, we already talked about this kind of parallel evolution of the internet as a social medium and Lord of the Rings fandom, that it kind of all happened at the same time. You wanted to ask me about real world meetups.
Oh yeah. There's a party that you talked about where you met Lord of the Rings fans, or you met up with them.
Yeah, there were a bunch of them party. Actually.
Oh.
We did cosplays before that was a word, where we would dress up as Lord of the Rings people and just kind of stand around and eat and drink. You know,
you've got an Aragorn cosplay, don't you?
Me?
Yeah. Am I making that up?
I think your dad does.
My dad does. Okay.
That's an odd thing to get switched around. Which one of my parents has this cosplay?
Yeah. Well, it's not so odd if you know his parents were both really weird. But no, there were a bunch of, 1 year, Finn, your aunt, my sister, had a Lord of the Rings themed Christmas where she gave everybody pippin apples in their stockings and chocolate mushrooms, and I gave her that big Aragorn life-size stand-up cardboard thing.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, so we actually had a family Christmas Lord of the Rings thing. But no, the big thing, Ian arranged this because it was a dark side event, was that we all went to the Return of the King Oscar party in Los Angeles when Return of the King was up for whatever it was, like 15 Oscar nominations or something crazy, including Best Movie of the Year. And so, I mean, of course, we didn't go to the actual Oscars or the actual Oscar party where the actors were, but we had our own dark side Oscar party, and then we had a huge kind of group Oscar party with Torn, the OneRing.net, which was a kind of rival Lord of the Rings message board. And it turned out that the Lord of the Rings actors and Peter Jackson all showed up at our party after their parties. So that was amazing amounts of fun and just a big whirlwind of...
You got to see them?
Yeah, definitely. Some folks
that's really
got
cool.
their pictures taken with them and got stuff signed by them. They gave speeches because they were, they were on a big high. They'd won every award in the world, and they'd been given important speeches all night. Mm-hmm. And when they finally got to us, they were like, "Oh, it's you people who make it all worthwhile. You guys are the reason we do it." They're just like gushing. And
that's wild. I can't imagine like actors from some popular movie showing up at some independent party nowadays. That's just like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, it was a big hall. I mean, we'd rented a giant thing and it was, catered, and there were costumes, people walking around who had been hired in costumes to freak you out, and, music, and it was a really big to-do. So it wasn't like they were just like walking into somebody's apartment or something. But nevertheless, they were there. And to me, Peter Jackson has been faulted a lot, but he's the man when it comes down to it. When it comes to the movie trilogy. So that was very cool. I'm trying to remember if Viggo Mortensen was there. I know a bunch of the hobbits were. And I don't think any of the women were, except for the women who were well, it doesn't matter. There were a lot of people involved in the production who were at that movie, at that party. And that was the highlight of the whole, the culmination of fandom for me.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's so crazy because that's like the precursor to conventions nowadays.
Right, and that's a big difference. That is a big difference between now and back then, because back then Comic-Con was about comic books, and people who had to promote movies only had to go to a handful of events, and now it's just tour after tour, and it's just a big obligation for them. Whereas back then they didn't have to do as much work, so I think it was easier for them to show up and have fun with us, for sure.
Yeah, because I've had very good friends that have gone to just conventions here in Virginia, and that NecoCon is here and stuff like that, and they're like, it's crazy, you see famous people and there's incredible cosplay, And that's for Virginia, which, you know, has a nerd population, but not one as dense as, like, you know, where, you know, Comic-Con and Gen Con and PAX and stuff like that, where it, you know, I've heard stories where it's just, like, this otherworldly event, which just sounds so crazy to me.
Yeah. Fandom is huge now. Fandom back then was very small.
Bunch of nerds.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of... Oh, sorry, go.
Yeah, no, I didn't know if you wanted to wrap up my stuff or not. I had a last...
You got more to say.
Okay. Yeah, no, I felt guilty because I had said, or regretful, that I had said that the highlight of my online fandom was that party and the stars, which actually is not the case at all. The highlight of my fandom is the friendships that have endured, people I met on those original message boards whom I'm still friends with today, and not just online, but we visit each other. And that's really the meaningful part of all of this. We don't talk Lord of the Rings anymore, but we made a connection. Like, I've got a friend named Jackie who lives in New Zealand, and of course Ian, who lives in London, and a friend named Jess who lives in Canada. And we all met online. A friend named Catherine, who lives in Germany. Catherine has hosted my professional website forever. I probably owe her $1 million for that. There are a ton of people I haven't named that I apologize to right now. Folks who I'm still in touch with, and folks whom I haven't spoken to in a long time, but I miss them. It was a really great group. But whatever, I made these contacts, and they were my first ever international contacts, and we've kept them up because the connection was so intense at first, and we just kept on, and now they're all my good friends, and I'm really grateful for that. I don't know if you all have the same kind of intimate experience with other fans, because there's so many of them. But for us, it was a very small group, and so we bonded pretty tightly.
I know there's the meme nowadays. I don't know if you know about this, Mom, but it's like the meme is, you say, what if the insert something here was, or wait. Yeah, what if the blank was the friends we made along the way?
Yeah.
Like what if the true, I don't know.
Yeah.
Goal
or
the
takeaway.
The true Horcrux was
right.
the friend. Anyway, I think even though it's this meme nowadays, it's like true. When that thing is like value or something instead of some random word that we insert nowadays in our, what's that word? Data revolution.
I've debated having for my for my cap for graduation was, what if the true diploma was the friends we made along the way, and like not explain the joke or anything. But
just to be ridiculously really cheesy, I think that's a really strong theme of the Lord of the Rings.
The real adventure was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the crazy thing too, is that like, they're like, with certain Discord things, like I know of a couple of people that are on a Discord server for a group of fanfic writers for a specific fandom, and they all chat and they're just like, here's an idea, or like, what about this? And it's all like, you know, not like friends that you would go and you know, be the best man for. You know, you're not that close with all of them, but you do have these friendships that you forge just out of being in like the most absurd places.
Fabulous.
All right, I think we're all good unless anyone has anything else to say.
I thought I lost you there.
Anyone got any more? Anyone got any more thoughts? No, we just had a slight technical issue.
Okay.
It was that Elijah was trying to come into the room. That's our cue to leave.
We stared at the door really hard until it started closing instead of opening. But yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast, Mom.
Thanks for having me.
You. I think it was a good conversation. I think
it was fun to reminisce in the context of how things have changed now.
Yeah. So before we go, we're gonna do some plugs because we forgot to do them the last 2 episodes. Find us on Reddit at reddit.com/r/foolsandfiction, where we've got different threads for every episode, so you can go and like click on this episode and put in your own thoughts if you so desire. We have an email, which is foolsandfiction@gmail.com.
Gmail.gov.
We're also actually on the network now, so go to Spreaker.something/pn something.
Wow, you're doing these plugs great.
Let me look this up. Spreaker.com/user/PNWM. That's /user/PNWM. And you can see the other podcasts that are on the network.
They're much cooler than we are.
Someday we might do a collaboration and gain their power.
God, I would love
steal
to do
it from
that.
them. Yeah, are there any other plugs that I forgot? Oh yeah, if you want to be on the podcast, just come on by.
Yeah, if you live in the William and Mary adjacent area, just fucking break down my door and be like, I want to collab.
Anyway, let's go get some dinner. Have you had dinner, Mom?
No, I have not.
Well, you go get some dinner too.
Feed the dog.
Yep.
Yeah, feed the dog. And yeah, let's. Would you like to end them, Joe?
Oh, right.
No, you do it by pressing the. You do the.
You're right. I do end them with this. Hold on.
Yeah, do ! Stop.
All right, hold on.
Thanks one more time, Mom. Before we are.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, guys. It was a pleasure.
I must say goodbye to the listeners. Goodbye. Please, for the love of God, turn the podcast off.